Welcome to Silent Screams, where fear comes to life. If you're looking for a way to lose yourself in a world of spine-chilling terror, you've come to the right place. Tonight, we're diving deep into true paranormal stories that will haunt your thoughts long after the screen goes dark. These are real-life accounts of haunted houses, disturbing encounters, and the supernatural forces that lurk just beyond the veil. Prepare yourself, this is not for the faint-hearted. As the clock ticks late into the night, the house grows eerily quiet. The hum of everyday life is replaced by a feeling of dread, something far too ancient and powerful to fully comprehend. You sit in your room, staring at the flickering shadows on the wall, waiting. You can't shake the feeling that something is watching you, waiting for the right moment to make its presence known. You've heard the stories, but this time, it's different. Tonight, the supernatural is no longer just a story. It's real. The house had always felt strange, even when you first moved in. There was a certain heaviness in the air, a weight that pressed down on you like the very walls were closing in. But it wasn't until late one evening, when you were alone, that the true nature of your new home began to reveal itself. The first incident was small, almost dismissible. You were in the kitchen, preparing a late-night snack. The moonlight barely filtered through the window, casting the room in shadows. You heard it then, soft, like the rustle of paper. A faint whisper. But when you turned, the room was empty. You chalked it up to the wind, to the house settling, or maybe just your own imagination playing tricks on you. But that was just the beginning. Days passed, and strange things began to happen more frequently. The light in the hallway would flicker uncontrollably, even though the bulbs were brand new. You'd hear footsteps on the floor above you, slow and deliberate, even though you were the only one home. You told yourself it was the house, the pipes, the creaking floorboards. Yet, something told you this was different. Something darker. It wasn't until you were in the living room one evening, flipping through a book, that you first saw it. A figure, tall and shadowy, standing by the window. It wasn't a trick of the light. You could see it clearly, outlined against the soft glow of the moon. For a moment, you froze. Your heart raced in your chest, and every instinct told you to run. But you didn't. You stayed frozen in place, staring at it. The figure didn't move. It didn't speak. It just stood there, as if waiting for you to do something. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. The window was empty, as though nothing had been there at all. The next few nights, things escalated. At first, it was the sounds, the scratching noises coming from the walls at night, like something was trying to claw its way out. Then, objects began to move on their own. A glass would fall from the counter without anyone near it. Books, left neatly on a shelf, would be scattered across the room, their pages torn. But it wasn't just the physical objects that were disturbed. The atmosphere itself seemed to change. The air grew colder, colder than it should be for a house of its size. You'd wake up in the middle of the night, shivering, only to find the blankets thrown off the bed, and your body stiff with cold. But the worst of it came one evening after a particularly long day. You had just come back from work, feeling exhausted, when you noticed that the living room door was ajar. You were sure you'd closed it before you left. You walked over, slowly, cautiously, half expecting something to jump out at you. But when you peered inside, nothing seemed out of place. Still, you couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching you. It wasn't just the silence, the oppressive heaviness in the air. It was the cold touch on the back of your neck, the brush of unseen fingers, that made your skin crawl. That night, as you sat on the couch, trying to distract yourself with a movie, something caught your eye. A reflection, just beyond the dark hallway. You turned your head, but no one was there. You looked back at the reflection in the TV screen, and then it happened again. The shadow moved, this time closer. But no one was there. The reflection was clear. There was someone standing behind you in the hallway. You jumped up, the blood rushing in your ears. Your breath came in short gasps, and you whipped around, searching for the source of the disturbance. But the hallway was empty. Yet, you knew what you'd seen. The reflection hadn't been a trick. Something, or someone, was in the house with you. You grabbed your phone and quickly texted a friend, asking if they could stay over. But even as you typed the message, a strange unease began to settle in. You couldn't explain it, but you felt trapped. There was no way out of this. No way to escape whatever it was that had taken residence within your home. The phone buzzed in your hand, but it wasn't your friend. The text message that appeared on the screen was from an unknown number. You stared at it, feeling a surge of fear rise in your chest. The message was simple, only a few words. Asterisk, I'm here. Asterisk, you tried to call the number back, but there was no answer. Just the sound of static on the other end, followed by a low, guttural growl. Your heart hammered in your chest, and for the first time, you realized that whatever was in your house wasn't just haunting it, it was hunting you. You turned the lights on, trying to calm yourself. You told yourself it was just stress, that your mind was playing tricks on you. But the feeling in the pit of your stomach told you otherwise. It felt like the house was alive, like it was waiting, listening, watching every move you made. The next night, the house grew colder still. The air seemed thicker, pressing in on you from all sides. You could hear your own heartbeat thundering in your ears. And then, the whispers came again. But this time, they were different. They were closer, louder, as if someone was standing right behind you, their breath hot on your neck. You spun around, but there was no one there. But you weren't alone. From the corner of your eye, you saw it, a shadowy figure moving across the room, its shape barely visible in the dim light. Your breath caught in your throat as it seemed to draw closer, inching toward you with deliberate slowness. And then, just as it reached you, it stopped. The room fell silent again. You took a few tentative steps backward, unsure of what to do next. You reached for your phone to call for help, but it was dead, completely drained, even though you had just charged it that morning. The walls seemed to close in on you, suffocating you with their oppressive presence. Every sound, every creak of the floor, every whisper of the wind outside, it all felt like it was coming from within the house itself. You stumbled backward into the hallway, your feet barely moving. The shadow followed you, a dark silhouette moving silently in the corners of your vision. It was there, and then it was gone, only to reappear in another spot, closer now, always just a few feet away. Each time you thought you'd lost it, it returned, growing bolder, more insistent. The phone remained useless, the lights flickered once more, and you felt the cold creeping into your bones. You weren't sure how long you had been standing there, your back pressed against the wall, waiting for whatever came next. Every second stretched on forever as the unseen force circled you like a predator, waiting for the moment to strike. And then, there was a knock on the door. The knock echoed through the house, sharp and sudden, breaking the eerie silence that had settled like a heavy fog around you. Your heart skipped a beat, and for a split second, you almost convinced yourself that it was just another hallucination, another trick of the mind, another phantom sound to add to the growing list of strange occurrences. But no! This knock was too real. It came again, 3 quick raps against the door, followed by an almost unnatural stillness. You stood frozen, staring at the door, willing yourself to move. The house seemed to hold its breath along with you, the air thick with a sense of foreboding. Every nerve in your body screamed for you to run, to leave the house, but your feet remained glued to the spot. You couldn't move. The feeling that someone or something was on the other side of that door was suffocating, pressing down on your chest. A whisper, barely audible, slid through the crack beneath the door. It was soft, at first, like a wind rustling through the trees, but then it became clearer. A voice, low and gravelly, with a hint of something ancient and bitter. "Let me in." You jumped back, your breath coming in ragged gasps. The voice was unmistakable, but not one you recognized. It wasn't human. It wasn't even a voice you could place in any familiar context. It felt alien, unnatural. Then, the doorbell rang. You had never used the doorbell. It was broken when you moved in, its wires frayed and useless. But now it rang, loudly, insistently, as though something, or someone, was desperate to get inside. Your pulse raced as the shrill sound reverberated through the house. There was no mistaking it. Whatever was at that door wasn't ordinary. You took a tentative step toward the door, unsure if it was your curiosity or the eerie pull of the unseen force that was guiding you. You reached out slowly, trembling as your fingers brushed against the cold, weathered wood of the door. The air around you grew colder still, and for a moment, you thought you could hear something faintly moving just behind you, in the dark corner of the room. But when you turned, there was nothing there. The knocking started again, but this time, it was accompanied by the sound of scratching, soft at first, then louder, more insistent, like something trying to claw its way through the door. You wanted to scream, to demand whoever it was to leave, but your voice was caught in your throat. The words wouldn't come. And then, something even worse happened. The door handle turned. You froze, every muscle in your body locked in place. For a moment, you thought your mind was playing tricks on you again. But the handle turned slowly, deliberately, as though someone, or something, was standing on the other side, testing the lock. It wasn't just turning. The door itself began to shudder, as though it was under some unseen force, straining to open. Without thinking, you stumbled backward, your heart pounding in your chest. You could feel the cold air swirling in the room, as though the house itself was exhaling. The scratching grew louder, the low voice outside murmured again, "Let me in, let me see you." And then, the knocking stopped. The door fell into a heavy silence. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. You stood, paralyzed, staring at the door. The only sound in the room was your own breath, ragged and panicked, as you tried to make sense of what had just happened. Your thoughts swirled, incoherent, until finally, the reality of the situation began to sink in. It wasn't over. It wasn't ever going to be over. You turned, quickly, running into the living room, and glanced frantically around. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, as though they were moving on their own accord. The silence that had once been a comforting blanket now felt oppressive, suffocating. You rushed toward the hallway, trying to gather your bearings, when you heard it again, the whisper. This time, it came from inside the house. "Don't leave me." The voice came from somewhere deep within the house, deep within the walls themselves. It wasn't a sound you could easily place, but it was so close, so near, that it felt like it was coming from within you. Every hair on your body stood on end. You couldn't tell whether it was real or if your mind was playing tricks on you, but you knew one thing: you had to get out of there. The hallway was darker now, and the temperature had dropped even further. It felt like the very air in the house had thickened, pressing in on you with a weight that made every step feel labored. The house seemed alive, as though it was pulsing with an energy that you could feel deep in your bones. It wasn't just haunted, it was a living, breathing thing. The walls groaned, the floorboards creaked, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of footsteps echoed, as though someone, or something, was walking slowly toward you. The light flickered above you, casting twisted, shifting shadows across the walls. For a moment, you thought you saw something. No, someone standing just at the end of the hallway. A figure, cloaked in darkness, its shape indistinct but unmistakable in its malevolence. It stood perfectly still, watching you. Its presence seemed to stretch time itself, warping the air around it. You took a step back, but then you stopped. There, just ahead, a figure appeared at the top of the stairs. It was tall, impossibly tall, and it was dressed in dark, flowing robes that trailed behind it like the remnants of smoke. Its face was obscured by a hood, but you could feel its gaze on you, cold, penetrating. You couldn't see its eyes, but you knew they were watching you. You could feel them boring into you like 1,000 needles. And then it moved. The figure floated down the stairs, its feet never quite touching the steps. It was as though it was gliding, suspended in midair, the movement slow and deliberate. Your heart hammered in your chest, and you felt your pulse race with panic. You wanted to turn and run, but your legs refused to move. You were frozen in place, unable to tear your gaze away from the figure as it slowly advanced toward you. The air grew colder still, and the shadows seemed to press in tighter, almost suffocating. The whispering started again, louder this time, echoing all around you. I see you. I see you. You didn't know what to do. You couldn't think straight, couldn't breathe. All you could do was stare at the figure as it reached the bottom of the stairs, and then stopped. It didn't speak, didn't make a sound. It simply stood there, its presence filling the entire hallway, blocking your only escape. For a moment, the figure simply stood there, like it was waiting for something. And then, it moved again, this time reaching up to its hood and pulling it back slowly. The movement was unnaturally smooth, like it wasn't quite human. What you saw beneath that hood was enough to make your stomach turn. It was a face, but not a human one. The skin was pale, stretched tight across the skull, the eyes empty pits of blackness, devoid of any soul or warmth. A gaping mouth, filled with rows of jagged teeth, opened in a grotesque smile. The thing in front of you was not alive, not even close. But it wasn't dead either. It was something worse. Welcome home, the thing whispered in a voice that was not its own, but came from somewhere far deeper, somewhere ancient and malevolent. And just as it spoke, the entire house seemed to react. The walls groaned, the floor shook, and the temperature plummeted. The shadows around you seemed to come alive, swirling, reaching out like tendrils, grasping for you. You could feel the weight of the darkness pushing down on you, pulling you toward that abyss, where the figure stood, smiling that horrifying, hollow smile. You couldn't move. You couldn't escape. The darkness closed in. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the whispering stopped. The shadows receded, and the figure vanished, leaving only the cold, the silence, and the eerie sense that it was still there, watching, waiting. The house was still. For now. But you knew deep down that you were not alone. And whatever it was that had been waiting for you was still waiting.